They opened the door. That heavy, rusted cage that once symbolized justice or perhaps vengeance, depending on who you ask. It creaked like an old cathedral gate, not because of time, but because of weight, the weight of stories, sins, scars. And then he stepped out. Some looked in awe, others in disgust, and a few in hope. Larry Hoover, once dubbed a monster of the streets, architect of chaos, father of fear, a name drenched in legend and blood, now walks beneath the sky again. But this isn't really about Larry, not entirely. This is about what happens when the monster returns, when the world that once demanded the lock now faces the key. What do we do when the cage opens? And what do they do, the ones who lived in it? Let me take you back to another name, fictional, yet more real than most news anchors. Jean Valjean, Victor Hugo's tormented soul, imprisoned for stealing bread, turned hardened criminal by a system that mistook punishment for justice. But after his release, something unexpected unfolded. Redemption, transformation. A life turned inside out by a single act of mercy, a bishop's silver candlesticks. The world had branded Valjean a thief, and for a while he believed them. But then he rebuilt himself, not in defiance of that label, but by transcending it. He became a mayor, a father, a savior, and yet the past never slept. Inspector Javert, the law personified, hunted him, not because Valjean sinned again, but because he couldn't believe in change. To Javert, a man who once erred must forever be a monster. That story, like Larry Hoover's, circles a question more ancient than law itself. Can a monster be forgiven? Plato believed that evil arises from ignorance. No one, he claimed, knowingly chooses wrong. The implication? Education, enlightenment, reflection. These are our tools of salvation. But Nietzsche had no such illusions. He warned us. Beware of pity. Beware of forgiveness used as a mask for weakness. To him, redemption wasn't gifted. It was conquered, fought for, bled for. So who was right? Perhaps both, perhaps neither. What we know is this. Releasing someone from prison doesn't mean they're free. Not truly, because society carries its own chains. Judgment, stigma, memory. The door opens, but does the world open with it? Or do we simply shift the bars from steel to silence? Larry Hoover walks out and everyone asks, what now? And maybe that's the right question. Maybe it's not about whether he deserves freedom, but whether we do. Whether we're ready to imagine justice not as a cage, but as a corridor. A place that leads somewhere, not just ends. You see, we've built a culture obsessed with finality. Cancel them, lock them, forget them. But history reminds us that redemption is messy and sometimes terrifying. Malcolm X was once a street hustler. Nelson Mandela labeled a terrorist. Jean Valjean a number, until they weren't. So what's the real risk? That monsters might lie or that people might change. We'll continue from here, unpacking what the opening of the cage really means and what it demands from us all. We love the drama of the cage being shut. The bang of the gavel, the clink of metal. It gives us a sense of closure. Illusion, mostly, but powerful. Yet the drama of the cage being opened, that unsettles us, because now we're part of the story. There's an uncomfortable truth buried here. It's easier to punish than to restore. A trial, a sentence, these are clean, sterile, bureaucratic. But redemption, that's messy. It requires faith, patience, and sometimes forgiveness from people who never got an apology. Larry Hoover's case isn't just about one man's freedom. It's about collective memory. The stories we tell ourselves about justice. Some say he ordered killings. He poisoned communities. There's no return from that. Others counter, he's 70. He speaks peace now. He's done more behind bars than some have done outside. But both camps orbit the same sun, fear. Fear that if we let go of the past, we betray its victims, or worse, that we might be next to face judgment. In ancient Athens, they had a concept called metanoia, a transformative change of heart. It wasn't just guilt, it was evolution. A soul turned upside down. But metanoia required space, time, and community. Not a solitary act of contrition, but a shared journey. Have we built such a space today? Or have we become Javerts in digital robes, scrolling timelines instead of dossiers, judging from tweets, not trials? There's a scene in Les Misérables where Valjean lifts a cart off a trapped man, exposing his true strength and risking his new life. He could have walked away, let the man die, but he chose to act. That moment revealed not just who Valjean had become, but what society had failed to see. Are we watching for such moments now? Or are we too addicted to outrage to notice? Let me offer a counter-image. In Rwanda, after the genocide, some communities held Gakaka courts, local traditional systems that emphasized truth-telling, remorse, and reintegration. Victims sat feet away from perpetrators. They listened, they wept, they forgave. Not always, not easily, but they tried, because they understood something we often forget. Without a way back, every path forward turns into a dead end. We should ask ourselves, is our system designed to change people, or just to store them? What's the point of a justice system that doesn't believe in the possibility of transformation? The cage open. Now what? Now, the hard part begins. Not for Larry Hoover alone, but for all of us, to wrestle with our contradictions. To ask not just if the monster can change, but if we can. Can we hold space for complexity, for paradox, for truth that doesn't fit on a protest sign? Because if we can't, then maybe the cage isn't the bars that held him. Maybe it's us. But that's the terrifying part, isn't it? That maybe the cage was never just for the monster. Maybe we built it for our own peace of mind, our own fragile need to believe that evil can be contained, labeled, isolated, like a specimen in a jar. Open that jar, and what spills out isn't just the past, but the fear that maybe we're not so different. This is where the philosopher, Michel Foucault, becomes impossible to ignore. In Discipline and Punish, he speaks of how modern societies move from punishing the body to disciplining the soul. The prison isn't just about bricks and steel. It's a theater of control, a place where the state doesn't just punish, it shapes, reforms, or so it claims. But reform only works if we accept that humans can change. If we don't believe that, if we assume a man is forever the worst thing he's ever done, then every release becomes a threat. Every second chance becomes a gamble. That's not justice. That's fear in a tuxedo. It's easy to play God behind a screen, to declare that some people don't deserve redemption. But who gets to decide that? Who draws that line? And more urgently, who among us is ready to be measured by it? When Valjean is hunted by Inspector Javert, the latter's obsession isn't just with law, it's with certainty. Javert cannot tolerate the ambiguity of a changed man. He needs moral clarity like air. And when Valjean disrupts that clarity, Javert implodes. He cannot live in a world where mercy exists alongside justice. Sound familiar? We live in a world increasingly allergic to gray areas, where every headline demands a verdict, where every comment section is a tribunal, and we, the public, are both jury and executioner. But there's wisdom in the gray. Martin Luther King Jr., writing from a Birmingham jail, warned us that justice too long delayed is justice denied. But he also understood the flip side. Justice too quickly served without compassion can be vengeance in disguise. So we're back to the cage. It opened. A man walks out, maybe changed, maybe not. But here's the question that no one wants to ask out loud. Are we ready? Not just for his freedom, but for the burden of having to live in a world where forgiveness is possible. Because if forgiveness is real, then so is responsibility, not just his, but ours. Responsibility to listen, to examine, to debate, yes, but not dismiss, to remember the victims while still believing in the humanity of the accused. It's hard. It's far easier to shut the door again. But we can't unopen the cage. So we have a choice. We can retreat into outrage, barricade ourselves in moral superiority, or we can step into the messy, difficult, necessary work of reimagining justice. Because maybe, just maybe, the true test of a society isn't how it punishes its monsters, but how it treats them after they've changed. But change is never simple. It's never a clean line from sinner to saint. It stumbles, relapses, questions that never quite get answered. And yet isn't that the arc of all of us? The uncomfortable truth is that every person who's ever changed started by being someone they weren't proud of. But society doesn't reward nuance. It rewards spectacle. Think of Larry Hoover. Not just the name, not just the man, but the storm of narrative around him. Founder of one of the most notorious gangs in America, a name tattooed into the history of crime. But then, the narrative begins to bend. Decades behind bars, claims of reform, campaigns for release. Not forgiveness, release. A distinction lost in the noise. And the noise is deafening. Some see a man who has spent more years in prison than many of his critics have spent alive. Others see a symbol, a man whose release might represent more than just one decision. It might be a message, a crack in the old foundation. And perhaps that's the fear. Because if a man like that can be seen as human again, then the whole system has to answer for itself. And systems don't like mirrors. In the Gulag Archipelago, Alexander Solzhenitsyn, who lived through Soviet prison camps, writes, "The line dividing good and evil cuts through the heart of every human being." That quote has become cliché, but only because it's so deeply, disturbingly true. There is no them. There is only us. Some of us fallen, some of us still falling. And if that's true, then what do we do with someone like Hoover? Do we lock him away forever as a monument to fear? Or do we look at the years, the context, the evolution? Do we allow space for man to become something more than what he was? This isn't about Hoover. It's not even about any one person. It's about us. Because when we decide someone can never come back, we're not just protecting society. We're protecting a version of ourselves that doesn't exist. A version that never made mistakes, that never needed grace, that never had to ask for another chance. But you and I both know that version is a lie. And maybe that's what haunts us when we talk about forgiveness. Because to forgive someone else means acknowledging that we might need it too. Someday, maybe not from a judge, but from someone we've hurt, someone who saw the worst of us and chose to see something else anyway. So let's go back to the cage. It's open, not because society has gone soft, not because we've lost our way, but because locking away darkness forever means locking away the possibility of light. If that man emerges with nothing but silence waiting for him, then we haven't built a justice system. We've built a vault, and we're all just waiting for our turn inside it. Let's say the cage opens and the man walks out. He's not met with cheers. He's not met with celebration. He's met with suspicion, with headlines, with cold stares in grocery stores. The past trails behind him like a ghost that won't stop whispering. It's louder than any apology he could give, louder than time, louder than change. But does that mean he shouldn't try? The French philosopher Jacques Derrida once said, "Forgiveness is only possible where it seems impossible." It's a paradox, yes, but it hits at the heart of the problem. True forgiveness, radical forgiveness, is never easy. It doesn't erase the harm, it doesn't deny justice, but it insists that a person is never just the worst thing they've ever done. If the cage was punishment, then freedom must be a test, not just of the man who walks out, but of the society that watches him. We have to ask ourselves, are we prepared to live in a world where people are allowed to return? Because the alternative is grim. A culture that demands perfection from the fallen breeds silence, resentment, recidivism. It doesn't heal, it hardens. And hardened hearts build hardened systems. That's how we get prisons that forget the word correction. That's how we get sentences longer than lifespans. That's how we get a world where no one is allowed to change and no one is safe if they do. But there's another way. It begins by accepting discomfort, accepting that growth can come from places we never expected. It means asking hard questions about how we define justice and who we believe deserves it. It means sometimes walking alongside the people we once feared, not out of naivety, but out of courage. Imagine what that world would look like. Not a utopia, not naive hope, just a society that understands transformation is real and rare, and therefore sacred. A society that knows redemption isn't guaranteed, but it should always be possible. A society that builds bridges where there used to be cages. This episode isn't asking you to forgive Larry Hoover. It isn't even asking you to believe he's changed. It's asking you to wrestle with the idea that people can change, that they must be allowed to, that we too might one day walk through a metaphorical cage of shame, regret, or failure, and need the world not to shut the door again behind us. Because ultimately, the question isn't whether monsters can be forgiven. The question is, when the cage opens, who are we? The watchers? The judges? The jailers? Or the ones holding the door open, quietly hoping we all make it out one day?